week 6 of the fantasy football season, and he has a few running backs I would bench this week. The first guy's Latavius Murray of the Baltimore Ravens. So Murray, a lot of people thought he was going to be a big signing right before the season started in week 1 for the Baltimore Ravens and signing Murray, but that just hasn't been the case. I thought Murray was a decent signing as well coming into the season, but so far he's been struggling with his new ball club here. Is Murray. His best game to date so far this season, week 4 at Denver, 18 carries, 59 yards and a touchdown. And last week on Monday Night Football, in that ball game versus the Indianapolis Colts, only 6 carries, 17 yards, and 2 catches for 13 yards. So right there, that's not good production, obviously, for Latavius Murray. Tyson Williams, we saw him back in the lineup and get some carries. And we even saw Devonta Freeman on some key third downs and stuff make a few plays for this Raven team. So as a whole, that whole backfield situation is a backfield situation I would look to avoid here over there in Baltimore. And this week I would bench Murray once again. The next running back's Chris Carson of the Seattle Seahawks. So another season and another line of nagging injuries here for Chris Carson. He didn't practice on Wednesday, but he plans to practice here today on Thursday with his neck issue. And even if he does play in this game, I don't like the matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers, who give up the third least amount of fantasy points to running backs. And plus, Carson's not 100%, and Russell Wilson's out of the lineup. So that's going to be the Steelers, in my opinion, stacking the box versus whoever the running backs over there in Seattle, either Carson or Alex Collins, and not getting much production out of that position with them trying to make Geno Smith beat them is Pittsburgh. So right here, if you got better options, I would bench Carson. I know it's going to be tough, especially with the bye weeks, but he's a guy that hasn't even been that good as well this season so far. Only with really 2 good games and 2 poor games, and the game he missed last week in week 5. So if you could steer clear of him, I would bench him this week because I don't see him doing much. The next running back's Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Miles Sanders, he was an early pick in the 3rd or 4th round of most fantasy drafts this season, and he's been a bust, no doubt about it, so far. And this is what I mentioned coming into the season, that Jalen Hurts is going to take some goal line plays from Miles Sanders, and that's what we're seeing now. Sanders, him not getting goal line carries with Hurts taking them, and then also him not receiving the football out of the backfield with Kenneth Gainwell getting some of those touches, even though last week, week 5 at Carolina, he did have 5 catches, but only 6 yards with 11 carries and 45 yards. So the way the season's gone for the Eagles and the game script as well, it's not been a good thing here for Miles Sanders and this team, where the game scripts go away from being a close game and then playing catch-up. And I think once again here, obviously, week 6 versus Tampa, they're going to have to play catch-up here tonight is Philadelphia. And I don't think Miles Sanders will see more than 12 to 15 touches in this one. So versus a tough Tampa Bay defense that gives up the 12th least amount of fantasy points to running backs, I think Miles Sanders, with the lack of production and playing time in big situations, he's a running back to bench this week. Next running back I would bench this week's Damien Harris of the New England Patriots. So Harris, he left the ball game in and out at Houston in week 5 with a little bit of a chest issue. And this week he's got a tough matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys that give up the 7th least amount of fantasy points to running backs. If Harris plays or not, he's a guy I definitely would bench this week here. The Cowboys in this game, the way they've been playing, should get up to an early lead. And we know once the Patriots play catch-up or behind a little, Damien Harris, he's a non-factor as a receiver out of the backfield. So this season, he's had a couple decent games. Week 1 and 2, he had double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues. And week 5, he did have 14 carries, 58 yards, and a touchdown, but had the fumble loss as well. So right here, with a bad matchup on paper versus Dallas and the way the game script might go, I think it's an easy bench this week in Damien Harris. I still could see him finding the end zone, but I don't see him cracking more than 50 or 60 yards in this one. In the 5th and final running back, I would bench this week's Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. So who knows what's going to happen with this Raider team and their offense in this one, with John Gruden out of town as the head coach now. And Josh Jacobs, he's looked pretty decent in the last 2 games since he returned from his injury. Week 4 at the Chargers, 13 carries, 40 yards, 5 catches, 17 yards. And week 5 versus the Bears, 15 carries, 48 yards, got a touchdown and 4 catches for 19 yards. But this week, a tough matchup versus division foe at the Denver Broncos in Mile High Stadium. So the Broncos give up the second least amount of fantasy points to running backs. And we know this Bronco defense, they're way better at home. And this Raider team as a whole has been struggling the last two bowl games. Points on the board and move the football. And I think that's going to be a problem once again in this one at Denver. So I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to do much. That's a few running backs I'll bench here in week 6 of the fantasy football season.